All right, everybody, let's get going. My name is Peyten Williams, and I'm here with Bowbend Consulting. And I am so glad you've joined us for When Your Child Has ADHD. And a quick disclaimer, I am not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. I don't have any training in any of this. I'm not a diagnoser. The only thing that I've ever really had encounters with respect to pretty much any parenting stuff and education is that I've been a teacher for 13 years. I got my master's in teaching, or excuse me, 16 years. I got my master's in teaching, and I'm a mother of three. And so I've had experience working with kids my whole life. I was a camp counselor. But so a lot of this is just observational, and then whatever training I got as an educator. So I just wanted to give that disclaimer, because if you have a child with ADHD, one of the first things I recommend doing is getting help from someone who is certified in this kind of stuff, because teachers can really be helpful to help you decide whether you have to do that or not. And then I do think that there's a lot you can do with, there are great doctors, there are great counselors who have specialty in this. So just quick disclaimer, because I know, especially with medicine, things get a little bit tricky, but I do have experience as a mother of a child, maybe two, with ADHD. And so I want to get started today that there are kind of four things we're going to talk about. The first is love the child you have. The second one is some routines and habits that have worked for me and I've seen work for other children. Um, Turns out that what's good for kids with ADHD is actually good for all kids. And so I laugh, like as a teacher, they used to say, hey, do this for your kid for ADHD, and it would turn out that it would be just good for everybody. And then how to kind of manage school, because school can get a little bit tricky, especially as your child ages. And so let's jump in. First, let's talk about love the child. Oops, excuse me. Love the child you have. So I think a tendency with when you have a kid with ADHD, they can be really challenging. A lot of times, parents have ADHD, and so you're a person with ADHD managing a child with ADHD, and that can be really tricky. And a lot of times we wish, like, oh gosh, I just wish they would sit still, or I just wish they could focus, or oh gosh, I just wish that I didn't have to say their name 500 times before they responded. And I think we can get into the like, I wish, and then that actually prevents us from loving the amazing child. And so I think one trap to avoid, if you can, is notice when you're sort of getting frustrated. And instead of I wishing, look for strengths, because you will be amazed at the things that your child with ADHD can do. I remember being just completely flabbergasted. One of my sons has ADHD, and he's combined type. So I know a lot of you probably know there's um, attention deficit disorder, where you're a little bit just more distractible, or you have a hard time focusing, and then you have ADHD, which is hyperactive, and that's where you get the wiggles, and you're touching and impulsive and all that kind of stuff. And then you have combined type, which is both. And my child has combined type. So he's distracted and wiggly, and I have a hard time getting his attention. And he doesn't like to transition very well from one activity to another. And he has trouble controlling his emotions. And hopefully some of you on this call are going, oh yeah, I have a child like that too. Because, and all those things, if you say those things, you go, gosh, that's hard to parent. But some amazing strengths that these kids have is they can hyper focus on something that they're very interested in. And so I remember when my son was about 6, he sat down with a thing of Legos, and for about 3 hours, he was just dialed in on playing with those Legos, creating new things, making things. And I was completely amazed that somebody who had such a hard time focusing on some things can really dial in and focus. And that was one of the strengths that I noticed. And there are just so many. But I think flipping from I wish to strengths finding can be a really helpful tool when you're starting to feel a little down in the dumps, because it can be really, really hard to parent a child with ADHD. Another thing about loving the child you have, and hopefully, if you have a child with ADHD, do a little bit of reading, and I've got some resources for you at the end. But, they're not lazy. It's not like, oh, you just need to work harder. It's about how they're wired and the way their brain works. And they can do it. They can focus. They can get to school with all their materials. They can do their homework. They can keep a clean room. It's just going to take a little bit more. And there are going to be some things where you're like, gosh, I'm such a bad parent. Why did my child blow up in the middle of Jalisco's? Or why did my child go to school with no shoes on? These are both things that have happened to me. And so, but it's not your fault as a parent. It's not your fault. Yes, a lot of ADHD is genetic, but you. It's not you making bad choices as a parent that is leading your child to act this way. It is literally how they're wired, and some of the things that they are blessed with is really, they're really amazing. That hyper focus is really amazing. A lot of times these kids can think outside of the box and they have outstanding creativity in ways that other kids, their brains are wired differently and they just don't. And so we want to think about, all the amazing things that are part of our children. Um, I think one thing that I was surprised by was just that social immaturity can come with ADHD. I didn't realize that. And so when I started to expect it, it made it a lot easier for me to love my child and go, okay, well, why are you acting like a 5-year-old when you're 8? Well, you have ADHD, and that's actually kind of normal. And then I go, oh my gosh, how kind of lovely is it that there are some things about my child that's so innocent in a way that, if you were a normal, or not normal, but I guess a differently functioning type of person, that immaturity and then sometimes that innocence would be gone. And also, I would say sometimes it's really hard to love the child you have because they're frustrating. And that's true for all children, by the way. But I think being able to get help from your school teachers, your school counselor, get help from a specialist in ADHD. There's some amazing therapy centers like Art It Out that can help with this, because doing it alone is not a sustainable option. And I think when you realize that getting help can really help you love the child that you have, that's an amazing first step. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some things these are things that have helped me help my child. So we know that kids, especially with ADHD, can be a little distractible, have a hard time focusing, might be a little irresponsible with their materials, might have a hard time remembering certain things. And so, one thing that I learned about the brain when I was a teacher is that our brains are lazy. And this is true for, all people. Our brains like to take the easiest route. And so, routines help our brains take the easiest route. And so, these are things that, again, good for all kids, but particularly helpful for kids with ADHD because, again, their brains are seeking that stimulation. They want to pay attention to the things that they want to pay attention to. But just like when we're driving a car and we arrive like at a destination and we can't really remember how we got there because our brains were doing other things, routines and habits, right? You have the routine, you always drive this way to work. Same thing for your kids. If you just make certain things routine and get them in those routines, it will really help them. And so thinking about a morning routine and a bedtime routine. I think one thing you want to think about as a parent of a kid with ADHD is that you're going to have to do the thing that you are trying to teach them for longer than you would if you did not have a neurodiverse child. So, for example, if I have one non-neurodiverse kid, and I can say, okay, bud, will you please get up out of bed and we're going to set your alarm. And then in the morning, we're going to set your alarm. You're going to brush your teeth and then you're going to come downstairs. We maybe have to practice that 3 times and he's got it. My child with ADHD, it's like for a long time. I'm scaffolding. I'm going, okay, bud, here we go. We're waking up at 7:30. Let's set your alarm. Okay, great. What do you do when you do this? And getting in that routine, but doing the same thing in the same way every day can really, really help make things smooth. I think I told the story. I have sent my child who has ADHD to school with no shoes on 3 times in his life. I'm a teacher. And so I think one thing, think about it, it's like when our morning routine is thrown off and it's like his shoes aren't in the basket that they're normally in, but maybe they were in the car after soccer practice or something. He forgets them. But if they're part of the routine, then it's an easy, okay, put on your shoes. And so I think that those are things to really think about as a parent. Okay, what can I do to establish some routines around times that are hard for me as a parent to help my child? Another thing that's amazing are check charts, because a lot of times those kids, I don't know about you, but I will be like, hey, have you done this? Hey, have you done this? Hey, have you done this? And it's like, what? Did you ask me a question? And having a check chart where it's something visual that they can cue in and that also they're in charge of, especially if you start that when they're young, they're excited to go check off, right? It gives their little brain that's seeking that dopamine hit something to be excited about, right? Another thing for those of you who have kids with ADHD that have a hard time transitioning. So one thing that is like, okay, we are, watching TV right now, or we are playing video games, or we are playing soccer, or we are doing, whatever it is your free time. For us, it was you're doing Legos. It was really hard and still is sometimes for us to say, and now that activity is over and we are transitioning to whatever it is, setting the dinner table. There was always a blow up or a fight or a just 1 minute, just 1 minute, just 1 minute, because transition times can be really hard for the kids. So having some sort of countdown timer that's visual, like a little timer, can really help, because you just say, okay, you've got 5 more minutes. Bonk, you set the timer, and then you're not the bad guy. The timer's the bad guy, and it cues them, and then they go, okay. But you got to give them that like 5 minute warning, and that will really help your kids who struggle with transitions to transition. I think if you think about homework, and especially with school, we'll get into this, but having some sort of um, planner at school, especially if you have older kids, where they and I don't care what it looks like. It could be a sticky note on their desktop. It could be a hard planner where they write it down. But for them to have a place where they can see not just what I need to do today or right now, but also be able to look into the future and see what's coming. A lot of times these kids struggle. I mean, ADHD means you struggle with executive function. And one of the things in executive function is planning. And so getting them early in life to practice that can be really great. So maybe that means you put up a kitchen calendar that your child, depending on how old they are, fills out. What do I have to do this week? What does that mean in terms of my responsibility, in terms of homework? Especially when it comes to our kids who can be a little overscheduled. Okay, well, I've got soccer practice and then baseball practice and then lacrosse practice and then gymnastics practice. And okay, well, when am I going to do my homework? That kind of advanced planning, especially when they're in late elementary school, can set them up really well for middle school. I would also say Post-its are kind of a huge remember thing, another tool you can use as a parent. So just those little visual reminders, because sometimes, at least for me and my family, verbal reminders don't work. But if my kid has something that he can touch, see, crumple up when he's finished, and throw in, like a basketball into the end, that helps. So, like with chores, we do like a check chart, or we do sticky notes where it's like pick it up and finish it and throw it in the trash when you're done. But anything where you can add a physical or written element where it's just combining a little bit more than just the auditory. Have you done this yet? Can really help. Another piece as your children get older is when they write their own charts. Okay, right. So like when they're little, you're creating the chart, right? Maybe it's even a picture chart, and they are putting a star when they, wash their hands or whatever. Then as you get older, you're writing it down, and then as they get older, then they are creating their charts, because again, kids with executive function problems need help and routines in executive function. And so, right, it's like you can, as a parent, help set them up for future success by giving them practice with their creating their own charts and reminders, because you don't want to be their personal assistant for life. You want, by the time they're in middle school, for them to be able to do it. And then I think natural consequences are some of the best teachers for our kids with ADHD. Like I said, I sent my kid to school with no shoes on 3 times. And the natural consequence was that he was really embarrassed and he hated it. But he didn't forget for a long time. And he made sure to, follow up with that routine of putting your shoe in the basket instead of just having it floating around in the living room where you're going to forget the next morning. And so I think, okay, your kid forgot the snack. They might be hungry until the next meal. That's okay. Don't rescue them. Those natural consequences are going to help kind of cue and fire that brain and help them establish those routines a little bit better. Okay, so again, we think about what's good for kids with ADHD is also good for all kids. So no matter what you do, it's not like you're like, oh, well, I've got to treat my ADHD kid differently than my, non-neurodiverse kid. Okay, great. No, everything you do for them is going to be really helpful for all your children if you have more than one. So again, with executive function struggles, the way that you support them is with establishing some routines and habits. Our kids with ADHD can also really struggle with emotional control. I remember being like, whoa, I have never seen somebody blow up so big about such a little thing as I did when I had my first child. And I think that, some tips that I learned both as an educator and then as a parent who reads a lot of parenting books, helping your kid name the emotion they're feeling can really help them with that emotional control. So when your kid is blowing up because, I don't know, for us, it was like um, a sister knocked over a Lego tower or something, that have them say it. You feel frustrated, you feel annoyed, you feel so mad, and then giving them those emotional words can really help. Another thing is to just, for us, a lot of times it's like, hey, you need to, take 5. You need to go away from the situation, from the person, create that space. And it's amazing to me to watch, especially when my kids get angry, right? That big blow up of emotion. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, once I've had a minute to remove myself from that irritating thing, uh, the kids really can do a much better job of being like, okay, I maybe blew up a little bit too much about that. Let me come back. Let me come back and, reset a little bit. Something else that has worked for me as a parent is our school does the 5 A's. And so it's like for apologies, it's, I don't know about y'all, but my children, all of them, not just my kid with ADHD, really hate to take responsibility when they do something wrong. But so having them say, I am sorry, I did this to you, right? To admit it, to apologize, to say, hey, can you please forgive me? Here's what I'm going to do in the future to make it up to you. Um, that has been really helpful because that really can restore the relationships, especially if your child struggles with some anger. Making them apologize either to you or to their siblings or to their friends really goes a long way in teaching them that. And again, it's like a routine, it's a habit. The other thing that has helped has been the reset, which I laugh. We always in my family do this, where it's like you're turning over a new leaf. So a lot of times, if we've had just like ooh, this was a bad moment, we say, okay, can we just reset? All right, let's turn over a new leaf. And just that hand signal kind of is like, sometimes I'll just do it right after they've had like a bad moment and just go like this. And they're like, yeah, we need to reset. But kind of giving them some grace, right? It's really hard. Again, they're wired to not be great at emotional control. And so we've got to help them. That physical impulsivity set those kids up for success. When you go to a restaurant or you go to a quiet place, think about, okay, you really don't have a lot of time for them to be doing nothing. So bring something for them to do at a restaurant. Those little sticker books or coloring or, Rubik's Cubes are great because they are kind of portable. Please don't use your phone. That's just like for your child's own impulse control. When you give them the phone to control their impulses, then they're learning that the only thing they can do to control their impulses is to be on their phone. And that's not going to be great for them in later life. Another thing with physical impulsivity is just separating kids, right? Or giving them their own chair or figuring out, okay, when we sit at this table, I'm going to strategically put you here because I know that you're going to have a hard time, or we're going to go for a walk after we order. And then, my husband will text when we're back done because, again, that just like touching all the time, right, can really be a tough thing. Sometimes kids with ADHD have trouble getting started. They'll just look at something like, oh, I don't want to clean my room. I really don't want to clean my room. I don't want to clean my room. And so you send them up to the room. You're like, clean your room. And they come up 15 minutes later and they've not started. That's pretty normal for kids with ADHD. And so when I was a teacher, I'd have a lot of kids with ADHD. And they would not get started on a paper. I'd give them 30 minutes in class. All right, everybody start writing your paragraph for homework for night. I'm going to be here if you need help. And 15 minutes would go by and there would be 3 kids in my class who had written nothing, 0, not one word. And so the one tip is to have them do just one thing. So that that just getting started. So if it's cleaning your room, okay, I just want you to pick up one sock and put it away. Okay, great, amazing. Give yourself a high five. Now I just want you to do one more, right? And then you keep them going, but you've got to be there to help them do that one thing. Just write one sentence. Just write the first word. Just, whatever it is, do one thing. And then that breaking down of the big task can really help that task initiation get started. For organization, have them figure out a place for everything. Let them choose. Where does it go? Where's the best place? Are you going to label it? Maybe let them do it if they're old enough. But as soon as you've got that, then that can help a lot with those routines. I would also say, we talked a little bit about this, but the changing focus, right? Give them that 5-minute warning, give them that 1-minute warning, maybe a tap on the shoulder instead of just auditory, or that egg timer can really help. And then when you're getting orders, or not orders, but like, directions for your day, right? A lot of times it would be like, okay, y'all, we're coming home from camp and now I need you to get home, take off your bathing suit, hang up your towel and take a shower and then come downstairs and set the table. Your kid with ADHD heard like maybe one word of that. And so it's, okay, I want you to go hang up your bathing suit and then come back and check with me. All right, now I want you to go hang up your towel, come back and check with me. So give them that broken down task. That can really help them at school. Think about how you are building their advocacy skills. Don't talk to the teacher for them. They can talk to the teacher, right? At restaurants, right? Let them order. Don't, that again, anytime you can help them speak for themselves, that's the best. Will you reconsider? It's like, if you say no, a lot of times kids with ADHD will try to fight back, or just kids in general, like, no, but mom, right? Teach your kids to ask, will you reconsider? That's a great advocacy tool, and it also shows respect. One thing to note, just as you're going through life, a lot of times kids with ADHD also will have some learning disability. So my children have dyslexia. And so I think that's something to be mindful of. If you think your kid has ADHD, they may also have a learning disability. And so getting good communication with the teachers early and often can really help with that. I remember getting a behavior chart when my child with ADHD was in kindergarten, and I was like, oh no, he's the bad kid. And one of my great friends gave me some advice. She said, I love a behavior management tool. Super helpful. I'm so glad they're doing that. And reframing that as like, okay, this is a tool that the teachers are taking extra time to help my child with, and to be grateful for it instead of be embarrassed, was game changing. So it's also helping them build their self-awareness, because a lot of times those sweet kiddos don't know I'm bothering people when I'm touching them during circle time, or when I'm tapping my pencil during math tests. And so, checking in with the teachers. What are you noticing about social stuff? Does my child have that self-awareness? How can I build that at home? That could be really helpful. And then I would also just really recommend, if you have the ability, particularly as your child gets up into the kind of first, second, third, fourth grade, if you are sure, or your teachers are sure, that your child has ADHD, it can be really helpful to get them tested by a professional, because a lot of times schools will give your child accommodations to help them focus in school. So, sitting at a desk by themselves, or having preferential seating in the front of the room, or even having a stand up desk so that your child can wiggle, right? All those things can help your child be their best self at school. And a lot of times it requires testing. So I'm a huge proponent of that. I think it's an amazing resource and a great way to get help. Oh, um, some other resources that, as we are kind of finishing up, I would say understood.org has been a helpful one for us as we kind of start to navigate some of this stuff. Um, Basically, if you Google ADHD on the web, I would go to things like the National Health Center, the CDC, the APA. Right? Don't go to like a mommy blogger, although I guess you could consider me that. But try to go to doctors and things that would give you some good information that is sort of scientifically based. And last but not least, y'all, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you joined us today. I hope if you have any questions, feel free to email me. But I've also got a YouTube channel. So if you missed this or you want to go back and watch it, you can go there. If you Google Bowbend YouTube, you can find it. I've also got a podcast called What Great Teachers Know that all parents can use. And it's got amazing educators who come on and give us tips and tricks about how to be better parents based on what they know from their training about in childhood development. And I highly recommend that. It's on iTunes and on Spotify. And then I'll see you in July, a little bit later, for Building Your Children's Leadership Capacity with Jennifer Arnold.